Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are talking about the Nioh Last Chance demo that was made available Friday, January 20th at 8 p.m. on the Pacific Coast, where I was eagerly awaiting my chance to test out this Dark Souls inspired samurai RPG. Similar to how I play most of the Souls games, I went into this demo pretty blind. I've only seen a few in-game screenshots and heard that it was a Dark Souls-esque game. What I take this to mean, and the Dark Souls-esque, is that there are three fundamental mechanics that are in place to give it a Dark Souls vibe. One, all attacks by both you and all characters in the game have animations tied to the attacks that you have to commit to. And two, based on these animations, all attacks must be predictable, which leads us to number three, all damage must be preventable. Over time, this concept has been tweaked a bit in the Soulsborne series as enemies have faster animations and there's the occasional hitbox issues, but this tends to mean that it's occasionally just harder to predict and prevent damage, as range is almost always an answer to fast, unpredictable hitboxes. So with those mechanics as our guidelines, let's jump into the demo while keeping in mind that A, it's its own game that doesn't have to be anything like Dark Souls. That's just my personal comparison because that's what I've heard it's like, and I love the series. B, it's still a demo, although I do believe the game comes out pretty soon, like a couple weeks from the time of recording. I would say much sooner by the time I released. It's been about 3 days since I recorded and now recording the audio. So I opted to play the tutorial mission to see what, if anything, from a Souls game, and while much of it was similar to a lot of action RPGs, I'm happy to have run through the tutorial to see what sets Nioh apart from others in genres. Controls are pretty straightforward. The controls a little bit more like Fury than Dark Souls in my opinion, but those are all changeable and customizable. There's a lot of added depth that's up to the player to master or ignore on their playthrough, like many action games where you can spam your way to victory or pull off flashy combos that chain together really nicely. There are 3 different stances to play with, and a 4th if you include the sheathed form, which has a few special uses. High stance focuses on heavy damage and low defense, changing your dodge into a heavy roll, and based on that, it's probably pretty easy to guess that mid stance is a good balance between offense and defense, and the low stance focuses on defense over offense. We'll come back to these stances features shortly here. Moving forward, the tutorial runs you through a few more combats that culminate in a fight with the yokai, which is really just a tougher enemy than the common mobs, with the added effect of creating what are, I believe, called just yokai zones. There's probably another name for that, but they just create these little fields that we'll touch on in a second here. On a side note, I know I've heard the word yokai plenty, but most recently I realized it's the name of Echo's drone in Rainbow Six Siege. Now, like I said, I don't remember the exact name of this zone that can be created, but while in it, your stamina, or ki as the game calls it, has reduced regeneration unless you use a ki burst, which we will touch on in just a moment. The yokai are a lot of fun to fight as the developers have a lot of freedom in the design of these enemies. The term yokai was used in Japanese folklore as a class name for supernatural monsters, ghosts, spirits, demons, and the sorts. So I'm excited to see what other types appear throughout the game and hope that there's enough variety to keep me interested in the full release, though from my understanding there are plenty of different types of yokai and even made up ones if they choose to go that route. As for fighting them, we'll loop back and touch on what is normally a pretty basic feature that Nioh has done some fun things with. Your stamina bar is now called your ki bar. The reason for this is that within the game there are a lot of things that you can do to manipulate your ki bar beyond the basic regeneration that most stamina bars do. There's typical modifiers like reduced regeneration while blocking, dodging takes stamina along with attacks, and so forth. The new feature, or really singular feature, has to do with ki bursts and how they work. There's some decent depth to this that I won't talk too much about until the full game is released, as I'm sure there's a lot more expansion about it, but the important part is that you regain a large chunk of ki after using it by timing an R1 press, similar to the way that Gears of War had an active reload system, making your reload faster and boosting your damage output. Use a 3-hit combo, wait for the bar to turn white, and press that R1 to instantly regain all that lost ki. Mistime it, and you have to go through the usual regen that all stamina bars go through. While the downside to waiting for your ki bar to regen is pretty minimal, even early on in the demo, it was easy to see the potential for all-out aggression with properly timed ki bursts to ensure that you take much longer to fully run out of ki and can pull off a lot of combos together. This also has a double functionality in the yokai zones that reduce your ki regen, because properly timing your ki burst will dissipate the zone, normalizing it back to the base regen. A little difficult to explain in terms of good or bad and the depth at which you can use these tools, but it's the combination of all these techniques that give Nioh strength in an area that I thought would kind of lose me. If you look at Dark Souls or Bloodborne specifically for comparison's sake, there's a limited number of weapons that the player can master and play through the game with that you get throughout playing the game. This is part of what makes the Soulsborne series great in my opinion. When you find that incredible weapon that makes you want to replay the game a new way, or you just want to find any weapon that you haven't used before and play the game that way, I personally believe that the main replayability factor of the Soulsborne series comes from each of those weapons' unique playstyle, with of course great gameplay to go along with it. On the other hand, we have The Witcher 3, another great action-adventure RPG, but who had a combat system that I found quite dull. At some point, I might make a slightly longer video on that, but the bottom line is that The Witcher just makes you grind out better weapons that all have the same moveset as far as each weapon type goes. And it's really just a question of whether or not you have the right numbers to do damage as opposed to having mastered a specific weapon or fighting style. Nioh finds a nice middle ground whose main drawback comes from the game's potential replayability, but we'll know more about that when it's fully released. Like The Witcher, you'll probably consistently be grinding for weapons that have higher damage versions of the same weapon. However, there are 6 types of weapons, at least so far in the demo: swords, dual swords, spears, axes, hammers, and my personal favorite, the Kusarigama. Each of these 6 weapon types, not including the ranged weapons that you acquire, which for the demo consisted of bows, cannons, and a flintlock rifle, all have a unique moveset for each of the 3 stances, as well as combos that can be executed, some of which are universal in any given stance, and others which require you to be in a specific stance to really pull off. I appreciate this feature as it gives the best of both worlds, depending on if you like weapon grinding, but the familiarity is definitely there in learning how to use a weapon and combo it out, so much so that the game even ranks your familiarity with a particular weapon while you're using it. The one thing I'm worried about is that it seems like I was able to use all of the available weapons in the game within the first level. So I'm worried that in the long run, it might not be as replayable once you've mastered or given every weapon a shot and found what you like. There might not be enough variety to make me come back through and play it again. Last but not least, there's your typical assortment of items: bombs, shuriken, kunai, masks, and armor, so forth. I should probably touch on the armor and point out that there are light, medium, and heavy armor types that can be mixed and matched. Stats have their own names. You get heavy rolls, you have an equipment load, and so forth. Very much like the Souls games and many other RPGs. So I think I've gotten most, if not all, the important gameplay details out of the way, so let's jump into the demo itself. I won't speak on the story as the demo doesn't really explain much, nor did I expect it to until the full game was released. You start off similar to a Dark Souls game where they have this shrine to pray to, which functions as a bonfire. At least for the first level, these shrines are fairly well spaced, and it's a good feeling when you find each one. There are also little Kodama creature things that you can find and send to the shrines. I'm pretty sure these unlock things at the shrine, but I don't know for sure, as these things could also just be unlocked as you progress through the level anyways. You level up at these shrines as well as do other Souls-like things such as prep spells, a unique living weapon, and a few other things. This stuff's pretty self-explanatory, but the spirit animal is something that I'll have to keep an eye on and see how that works. It's essentially an ultimate move that you can trigger, at least as far as the base controls go, circle triangle at the same time, and really empower your weapon to a higher extent. I'm sure there's more to it, and there are also multiple types. That was just the one that I used at the time. Proceeding through the level, it's a pretty normal level, I would say. Good enemy placements, good warning for several of the fights to get used to. One-on-one combat, outnumbered combat, heavy enemy combat, ranged fights, and a couple more. Even traps and lures. It's well-paced and well-balanced for the most part. And after hearing myself say that, I would go back and say it's a pretty good level. It's not a pretty normal level. It's very well executed. It wasn't until the end of the level, when I faced the first boss, that I started questioning the controls and the mechanics that I mentioned way back at the beginning. Taking this with a grain of salt, as the game is still in demo, and this is my first time playing it, I couldn't shake the feeling that there are still a few minor issues with the combat on some of the bigger or harder bosses that might show up throughout the game. It's not so much that it felt unfair or unbalanced, it just seemed like it wasn't as consistent as it should be. I got spanked many times by the first boss, as I expected most players to, before finally beating it the morning after the demo came out. But at many points it felt like a move that I had seen several times before would hit me through a dodge, even though I've timed the same dodge successfully several times prior. And that once hit, I would often get stun locked into a significant combo, leading either to instant death or a large waste of limited healing supplies from a hit that didn't really feel like my fault. Again, I can't confirm this, of course, as it's all my opinion on the combat, but it seemed to come out in greater force in the next fight where you duel against another samurai. This time a friendly general who wants to test your skills, although he will still kill you. This fight seemed totally unbalanced to me, though I admittedly did put a ton of time into it. problem here was that I would get stun locked almost immediately and get 100 to 0'd right after. Well, I couldn't do anything about it, or at least get 100 to 1 and have no health remaining. Not only would this happen, but there were multiple combos of attacks that would do this to me, stun lock me, and instant kill me. Beyond that, it didn't seem like I could do anything in reverse to him. I couldn't stun lock him, I could barely dash in for an attack and dash out before he turned around on me. Blocking didn't work, as he would immediately break through it and continue to damage you, pulling off the same combos that were killing you prior. I'm willing to put a lot more time and effort into this boss because I'm sure that there are things to it, but at least for now, it seems like he just disregards anything you attempt to do and will continue to stomp you over and over. So overall though, very excited to play this game. Playing differently from a Souls game doesn't make a game bad by any means, but the Soulsborne series is my standard for an action RPG, and so far, Nioh lives up quite nicely, if not missing out on just a few minor things that I can accept, being that it's not the same company or the same game. I hope the developers truly studied the Souls series though to see what makes them great aside from just the combat. I want to see secrets, I want to see a great story that could either be just told right to you or hidden like it is oftentimes in the Soulsborne series. Otherwise, I'm afraid Nioh is going to be all combat and grinding and little to differentiate itself from other action RPG games, outside of just being a difficult Soulsborne style. We saw that with Lords of the Fallen, which was not a very great game, and I just want to see how they do here this time. So thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to see you back when I get the full review out for Nioh.